Good afternoon and welcome back to the second day of the symposium, Transposition as Artistic Practice, held here in Bergen. I am Amy Vandenhoeven and I am in my second and final year of my master's here at the Faculty of Fine Art, Music and Design. Yesterday we heard many presentations that explore transposition as an approach to artistic research. We will now hear Professor of Composition Daniel Petabiro give his presentation, Movements of History, Transpositions of Spirit. The presentation sets out to give an overview of his artistic research as a composer. The artistic research both contextualizes and responds to historical and contemporary issues of xenophobia and freedom of expression.
Thank you to Hilde Kramer for the invitation to the conference Transposition in Artistic Contexts. My talk today is entitled Movements of History, Transpositions of Spirit. Today, I will talk about the background of my work as a composer and the formation of my practice of historicized composition. Then I will go on to describe some of the social and political relevance of my compositional work in various artistic research contexts. In introducing how I compose, I often show pictures of Budapest, a city where I grew up, to introduce how one might listen to a piece of music. We see here on top Budapest in 1900. Underneath, we see the city in the year 2000. These images displaying historical changes across 100 years can be compared to a music composition. In listening to a piece of music, we listen to various layers of history. Much like this city that was once part of a monarchy, changed with fascism, communism, and countless revolutions, a piece of music can also embed material from various historical epochs. A composer deals with creating new musical material. The research component lies in creating innovative material and forms. Simultaneously, composition can be a way to investigate the past and carry it forward into the future. Beginning my compositional studies at the Bartók Conservatory in Budapest, Hungarian and Eastern European folk music was a major part of the music curriculum. After my studies, I worked at the Academy of Science, transcribing Hungarian laments. These laments, performed by women, are the oldest known form of Hungarian folk music. I started my PhD studies at Princeton University in 1999. There, I started to write a dissertation on music and language, examining works of Mahler, Webern, Helmut Lachenmann, and Brian Ferneyhough. This plan got derailed. In the end, I produced a study of chant, comparing Hungarian laments, Jewish Torah recitation, Christian plain chant, and Islamic Quran recitation. This affected the way I compose and how I perceive what music is, where it comes from, and where it might go. For me, composition is a way to create the new and also investigate traditions that reach back far into the past. In this light, a composer creates a kind of Esperanto, a particular musical language. This relates to ritual-based musical languages that repeat and those that are autonomous, new, and developing. My music traverses these two spheres of musical functionality and expression. Ethnomusicological research is important for me as a composer. Bartók, here the great-grandfather of ethnomusicology, remains an example. Béla Bartók, who undertook studies of folk music in Eastern Europe, North Africa, and Turkey, was the first composer to make comprehensive studies of folk music traditions. In so doing, he employed the most recent technology to slow down recordings and transcribe them, as he is doing here. Elements of Hungarian, Eastern European, North African, and Turkish folk music were also integrated into his string quartets, demonstrated in my book, published by Oxford University in 2004. Following Bartók, my own compositional practice integrates ethnomusicological research and various technologies. In 2011, I came to the Netherlands to be visiting professor in the Computing and Information Science Department at Utrecht University, working on a research project funded by the government of the Netherlands, focusing on oral culture in the country. During my stay in the Netherlands, I started out by recording members of synagogues and mosques across the country. A research team then analyzed these recordings. Many of the reciters of Quran recitation I recorded came from an Indonesian background. Teachers at Indonesian mosques taught an Indonesian style of recitation, even though not all the students came from an Indonesian background. Many of these recitations were based on expert Quran reciters like Haja Maria Ulfa, pictured here.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر صدق الله العظيم.
Computational analysis methods developed with colleagues at Utrecht University allowed me to find the melodic contour of given recitation performances. With this technology, one can compare contours and the frequencies in and across cultural and religious chant traditions. This research also affected how I employ tuning as well as relationships between text and music within my own compositional work. Such ethnomusicological research became integrated into the Mishpatim composition cycle, completed at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, Harvard University, in 2014 and 2015. This extensive body of work, written over 13 years, employs texts from and various chant traditions connected to the Book of Exodus and Book of Jeremiah. Such integration of ancient traditions is part of my practice of historicized composition. In the fourth part of the Mishpatim laws cycle, I set the following Hebrew text from the Book of Jeremiah. Quote, "Behold, I hereby give the command, by which I will bring them back against this city. They shall attack it and capture it and burn it down. I will make the towns of Judah a desolation without inhabitant." End of quote. In this movement, text becomes fragmented and translated by the instruments as they imitate phonetic attributes of the text. These become extended through live electronics. Simultaneously, I employ resonant instruments and electroacoustic convolution to create a sense of sonorous excavation. In 2017, I co-organized and was active as a composer in the Narratives of Memory project, funded by the Jean Monnet program of the European Union. In this project, 3 composers, Andrea Sigedvari from Hungary, Zaid Jabri from Syria, and myself wrote compositions for specific historical sites of trauma. These 3 sites were the Eastern Railway Station in Budapest, Hungary, the Ravensbrück concentration camp in Ravensbrück, Germany, and the Camp de Mille in Demille, France. In responding to sites of collective violence and oppression, one is often dealing with aspects of memory, which, influenced by traumatic experiences, remain fragmentary, needing to be reconnected in terms of time and place. An architectural analogy to this process of memory was experienced when we visited the work camp in Ravensbrück. Here we found only ruins of the previous site of trauma, where slave laborers worked for the Siemens firm, a company that still operates today with a global reach. In this way, previous historical experiences needed to be artistically decontextualized and formed via temporal structuring in musical compositions. For my own composition, Gvul, Border, written for the Camp de Mille, I created a composition that responded to the history of the space as a site of traumatic memory. To accomplish this, I first recorded the actual spaces of the Camp de Mille, employing electroacoustic convolution, making a kind of acoustic blueprint of the space itself. This blueprint was then employed in conjunction with the piano, which itself acted as an acoustic space for the composition, expanded via a spatialized live electronic setup. The actual material of the piece derived from fragments of the B-flat major sonata by Franz Schubert from 1828, his last piano sonata, and this was employed as a historical object within the composition. Let us compare a section of the composition of Schubert with that of Gvul, Border. The concert at the Camp de Mille, originally intended to be a public presentation in which the work would be premiered, had to be cancelled. While we were at the site, which today serves as a museum for the history of genocide, we learned that the concert would have to remain private because of security concerns. Similarly, in Hungary, The concert with the premiere of Andrea Sigurðard's work was to remain a private event, and we were not allowed to advertise it. This was due to the content of the piece and the larger political situation in Hungary. Andrea Sigurðard's piece dealt explicitly with the refugee situation in Hungary and the right-wing reactions to Syrian refugees entering the country. A month before the concert, the Hungarian government decided to close down the Central European University in Budapest, the venue of the concert. A week before the concert, the Orbán government started a campaign against the university's founder, Jewish Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros. George Soros is also a Holocaust survivor. The poster here reads in Hungarian, "Ne hagyjuk, hogy Soros nevessen a végén." Translation, "Don't let Soros laugh last." This kind of propaganda showed the participants in the project how aspects of past and present collide in terms of xenophobic politics. My artistic research serves to address problems of history, discrimination, and essentialism. In so doing, I must also see with open eyes what is happening in Europe and in Norway in terms of growing intolerance towards religious minorities, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, causing a sharp rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim sentiment. In this light, my work continues to insist on addressing not only historical, but also contemporary problems of essentialism and rigid categorization. Such a process is described by Francesca Albertini in relation to Levinas's critique of Hegel. I quote, "A language which does not refer to any determined meaning, but whose musicality lets resound the perceptible against the mortally sclerotic process of the ilia. Even by breaking up the monism of the eye, art offers to the eye the opportunity of not losing itself in the chaotic senselessness of the perceptible. Art offers itself as creative source of meaning, as a resurrection of the face. Hence, art is not merely an iconoclastic gesture because, through the sonority of its language, it is not able only to collect into unity the multiplicity, but also to connect finite and infinite, particularity and universality, without transforming this collection in a sort of idolatrous totality. Art can save the difference of each element and can create inside of them an infinity of other differences which cannot be reduced to the Hegelian totality." End of quote. The methodology of historicized composition is directly connected to both individual and collective memory experiences. This methodology and the resulting artworks attempt to give answers to the ideology of essentialism by looking for the particular offering a resurrection of the face, thereby connecting finite and infinite, particular and universal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Daniel Petter-Biro. I'd like to remind the viewers that we will have a session on Zoom after the last presentation today around 4:30 Central European Time. If you have questions for the speakers, you can ask them in the forum directly. And if you don't already have the link to the meeting, it will be provided on the illuminating.no and the kmd.uib.no websites, and also in the program under the stream. The next speaker is Pinar Yelmi, Assistant Professor at İSİK University, Turkey. The title of her presentation is Sounds of Istanbul. This research aims to investigate ways for designing an interactive visual interface for archiving the cultural sounds of Istanbul. The Soundscape of Istanbul project approaches everyday traditions and daily urban life from a sonic perspective.
Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. I'm Pınar Çevikayak Genli. I'm currently assistant professor in Visual Communication Design Department at Universitet. Today I will talk about my doctoral research that I conducted at Koç University between 2012 and 2017. My doctoral project is mainly about designing an interactive visual interface for archiving the cultural sounds of Istanbul. Let me first start with the main intention of the project. The Soundscape of Istanbul project approaches everyday traditions and daily urban life from a sonic perspective and aims to increase public awareness of cultural sounds by means of exhibitions. Sounds are inevitable parts of our daily lives and our cultures. Also, sounds are of great importance in terms of intangible cultural heritage. Sonic cultural heritage is twice endangered due to physical characteristics of sound itself and dynamic structure of intangible culture. Sounds that are not protected or archived get lost forever. In a dynamic city such as Istanbul, daily life and urban sounds change rapidly. Therefore, it's significant and necessary to protect cultural sound marks of the city as soon as possible to sustain cultural identity and cultural memory. The Soundscape of Istanbul project, besides being first of its kind, is very significant and it may lead to further multidisciplinary research as sonic culture is deeply dependent on various factors such as sociological, political and economic conditions. In this project, sound symbols of Istanbul were determined according to an online survey and interviews. These characteristic urban sounds were recorded with professional equipment throughout the year 2015. A specific metadata system was developed for cultural sounds, and the collection of the Soundscape of Istanbul was made publicly accessible at Koç University Suna Kıraç Library. Thus, the collection lays background which future soundscapes and the recreation of past soundscapes may then be added as well. In order to expand this sound collection, Soundslide Project was initiated. In this project, an interactive platform was developed which anyone can upload their own sound recordings. The main aim of the project is to raise public awareness of urban and cultural sounds and to protect these sounds as a collective work. The Soundscape of Istanbul project became associate partners with Europeana Sounds, and the collection can also be accessible under Europeana Sounds portal. The project was also presented as an interactive installation in Koç University Research Center for Anatolian Civilizations and by means of an experiential exhibition in Studio X Istanbul. Now let's discover the Sounds Like archive together. Okay, so this is the visual interface of Sounds Like archive. We have mainly two visualizations for the archive. One of them is spatial map and the other one is thematic map. Here we have the categories of sounds related to the city of Istanbul. So these categories are food and drink, street professions, nature, craft, entertainment and leisure, festivals and events, sports, transportation, urban and religion. So basically these small dots are symbolized for the sound objects, and the big ones are the categories. So basically when you clicked on this little dot, related sound opens. Okay. And an information page occurs here. So the contributor name, date, categories, text and duration, and the little explanation here occurs related to this sound. So this is one of the street professions. And let's play another one, chant.
E un rampollo spunterà dalle sue radici. Lo spirito del Signore riposerà su di lui.
It's possible to listen three different sounds at the same time at this web page now. So you can see the relationship within the sounds and the categories with these tiny lines. So okay, let's go to the spatial map. Okay, so basically here we have the zoom in and zoom out. Here we have a timeline here, so you can choose the dates that you want to listen sounds. For example, so these are the sounds that you see on the map are recorded between 1968 and 1992. So for example, let's listen to this one. So this is the transportation sound that we don't hear anymore because it's recorded on 1968, and it's the contributor is obviously someone else. It's a retired person from Turkish radio and television. And for example, let's listen to this one. So this sound belongs to the same contributor, and it's a steamship that we don't hear anymore. So it's recorded on 1970. Okay, so let's come to daily life. Today's Istanbul. For example, let's play this one. Or this one. So this is a street profession. It's very common in Istanbul. So when you click on the sound, you can see this flashing color around the sound. So you can understand that we are now listening to this sound. Okay, here here we have the information page, contributor date, categories, text, duration again, and a little explanation here. So when you click on the contributor name, so the person that recorded the sound is me. So when you click on my name, you can see that you can see all the sounds that I recorded and uploaded to this archive. Okay, so we have a list for categories here, again related with these colors. So when you would like to listen only religion sounds, you basically hit this button, and here you have only religion sounds. And these are entertainment and leisure sounds. Okay, so if you would like to add sound to this archive, here we have add sound button. You just hit this, and we have a login page. When you log in, there comes a form, and you need to upload your sound, upload a photo related to the sound, and you need to specify date, time, and location. You need to enter a little explanation, and here you go. And this project is initiated for the city of Istanbul in the beginning, but now we have lots of different cities from Turkey and also from England and France, like London, Le Havre, and Paris. So the archive is growing and growing. And here we have the guidelines. So this is because it's not required to be a professional sound recorder to contribute to this archive. So anyone, the project is open to anyone. So anyone can record a sound and upload to the archive. So here are very basic tips about sound recording, sound editing, how to take photos and edit them, and basically how the content should be. And yeah, this is the project. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pinar Yelmi, for transposing us via sound to Istanbul. We now return to the field of illustration as lecturer Stephanie Black from Kingston University in Great Britain speaks about illustration and the other, reflective nostalgia, and critical practice. The presentation proposes that the concept of reflective nostalgia is a useful tool for illustration to employ in this way, a strategy derived from reflections on an expanded illustration project undertaken by the author.
Hello, and thank you very much for choosing to listen to and watch my conference presentation, albeit virtual. Now, this paper is aligned with the conference theme of the other, because what I'm going to be looking at today is the role played by images in performing that othering. And it also ties into something Jolene was exploring in her discussion of the terminology related to the project, specifically the non-representable, because what she was talking about was ideas that are difficult to represent because they're taboo in some way. And what I'm going to do is focus in a slightly sideways fashion on the way images convey some messages that are rightly taboo, difficult political messages that I particularly don't agree with, because the positive side of this is looking at how illustration can be used to counter those. Now, in particular, the discussion I'm going to undertake today has a focus on political events in the UK of recent years. Now, this is where images were employed to undertake highly visible othering in political campaigning that we saw in favour of the UK leaving the European Union, or henceforth I'm going to call it Brexit because it's a damn sight snappier. Now, to counter this, what I'm going to look at is an example from an expanded illustration project that I worked on for a few years to explore how the concept of nostalgia in particular can be used within illustration to give it political agency and to help it fight back against those sorts of messages. And it's very much taking place within this political context. So to explain the project a little bit better, I made visual essays of sequential images, sometimes animated, sometimes film, sometimes collage. So I call those visual essays works in sequence that were projected alongside the songs from an album about the decline of pubs. So when those songs were performed live, I would project these images, they were encapsulated as short films, and I'd project them behind the band or in front of the band. And the band was called Plume of Feathers, which was also the name of their album of songs. So when I discuss Plume of Feathers, it's that project I'm referring to. And while reflecting on what I was making for that project, I really had to examine the overlap between this project's focus on pubs and the fact that the image of the pub was absolutely embroiled within pro-Brexit communications. It was being wheeled out as a backdrop and a shorthand for heritage and for good old-fashioned British values. And that was absolutely at odds with the aims of the project, and that discomfort really forced me to scrutinise what images were doing with respect to those pro-Brexit messages, and also what my images were doing in amongst this visual conversation, to ensure that the messages that I was putting across weren't supporting something I was deeply uncomfortable with. Now, that exploration led me to the concept of nostalgia, because it was something that was hovering over the project, which itself was a massively retrospective endeavour. So it was about looking backwards towards what was lost when pubs close, so their social function and pub culture. But as well as that, I was using nostalgic materials as well. I was using old photographs and printed matter to make my images, so it's definitely something that deserved greater scrutiny, especially in light of the fact that I was suspicious of nostalgia. So to locate this understanding within the literature a little bit more, so to understand what nostalgia is all about, I was very much drawing upon the work of Svetlana Boym and her book The Future of Nostalgia. And she wrote about how nostalgia is aligned to ideological projects concerned with national identity and calls that restorative nostalgia. So she divides nostalgia into two different tendencies. One's called restorative and the other's called reflective. So to return to restorative nostalgia, this is a form of nostalgia that includes longing for one's homeland and typically sees itself as truth and tradition. Boehm's reflective nostalgia, on the other hand, is something that focuses on the longing for the past, and it asks us to critique and analyse why we're longing for the past. It uses the gap between past and present to facilitate scrutiny of why we're looking backwards with dissatisfaction. And it's that dissatisfaction that's a requirement for nostalgia for Scott Howard, who calls it the poverty of the present condition. So reflective nostalgia is critical and analytical. It calls the truth into doubt, and it also allows us to imagine how things could be different. And in this regard, it's aligned with what Linda Hutcheon was saying about nostalgia, in that she said that it's reconstructing the past in accordance with present needs. So there's a great deal of fiction involved in nostalgia. So we're reinventing what the past was like to suit what we need right now. And also what we have right now isn't satisfying us in some way. And that's why we're looking to the past. And reflective nostalgia is scrutiny of that in order to improve matters for the future. And what I'm proposing is that reflective nostalgia can be adopted within image making to counter those divisive messages that were served by restorative nostalgia. So reflective nostalgia is intriguing. It's an interesting concept to engage with in illustration because it's the opposite of what's usually written about nostalgia in illustration, which admittedly isn't extensive, but that's why we're all undertaking these projects right now, yeah? But what I want to do is bring the socially aware and utopian potential of reflective nostalgia into illustration, because I think that's what can give illustration political agency and allow us to fight back against some of the deeply uncomfortable political messaging that's undertaken by images. To explain this a little bit more precisely, in the Plume of Feathers project, I deliberately used pastness and wistfulness that are aligned with nostalgia to give images their critical role. So I was using pastness and wistfulness to question representation, so the imagery that I was using, and also the role played by the surface of the image, so much more formal concern there. Wistfulness is a feature of reflective nostalgia, where the object of longing is irrecoverable, and scrutiny of that longing creates room for a critical appraisal of the present. Images produced for the project also used pastness. Now, this is a concept that Frederick Jameson wrote about when he was lamenting pastiche and the image that was an easy-to-consume, dislocated image of the past, and we focused on enjoying the surface of it, but were blind to the politics of the image. We were blind to what the past was actually like and any sort of lesson that we could learn about the future. So it was essentially emptying politics out of images so we can consume them and they could be used cynically to make lots of money. Now, in respect of my project, what I was doing was absolutely employing pastness, because I was using old photographs that were clearly aged. They had those traces of time passing that Svetlana Boehm aligns with reflective nostalgia. And what I was doing was very deliberate. I was using that pastness in a very specific way to unite two sets of photographs from two different photograph albums from different places and different times. And they were made visually indivisible by that unifying veneer of pastness. Now, the reason for that was because the photograph albums were from Denmark and Scotland. And what I was trying to say was that we have more in common than that which divides us, to quote the MP Joe Cox. And it was very much trying to put forward a different perspective from that of the anti-immigration messages that we saw as part of the Brexit campaign. So while Jameson suggested that superficial pastness dulls politics when we see it in images, I'm proposing that the patina of time that Boehm attributed to reflective nostalgia is actually a very powerful tool, and we can use this in illustration to refute some particularly difficult political messaging when we translate the concept of reflective nostalgia into practical illustration processes. Therefore, to essentially turn Jameson's idea inside out, what I'm saying is that by being hypersensitive to the surface of the image, we draw attention to the past. We don't put it in the bin and just enjoy the surface. We draw attention to it and also the present in order to explore their imperfections and try and address these in some positive sense for the future. Now, in conclusion, what I would like to leave you with is one key point, in that it's the image maker's ability to make things up in how we imagine the past differently that unites illustration with reflective nostalgia, and that's what makes it a really powerful tool for proposing future alternatives. So as Svetlana Boym states, reflective nostalgia has a utopian dimension that consists in the exploration of other potentialities and unfulfilled promises of modern happiness. What I've argued here is that illustration can operate as an agent of change by employing reflective nostalgia, and can therefore change the conditions that give rise to nostalgia itself. I would also like to point out that the argument that I've given you a whistle-stop tour of today is explored in much greater depth, and much greater detail, in a related journal article that I'm hoping to have published soon. But I thought that these high points were much more relevant to the conference's focus on othering and the other. And I do welcome communications and conversations that offer examples that extend or refute the points that I've made here, because I'm aware that they arise from a singular practical project. And I very much look forward to broadening out our understanding of reflective nostalgia and its utility to illustration with conversation. Now, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the rest of the presentations and hopefully communicating with some of you in some respects digitally across the course of the conference. But all that remains to be said is thank you very much indeed, and have a splendid conference.
Thank you, Stephanie Black. I'd like to remind the viewers again that you'll have the opportunity to ask questions in the Zoom forum after the talk today. If you don't already have the link to the meeting, it will be provided on the illuminating.no and the kmd.uib.no websites, and also in the program under the stream. We will now have a short 10-minute intermission. See you again shortly. Hello and welcome back. Associate Professor Charles Mikkelsen is a sculptor and works at the Faculty of Fine Art, Music and Design in Bergen. We will now hear his presentation called From Idea to Indication.
Hi, my name is Charles Mikkelsen. I'm an associate professor at the Institute of Design, KMD, University of Bergen. And I will speak about my artistic research from idea to indication. How can intuition be formed into ideas, thought formed into spoken words, and the sense of intuition transposed into an indication such as an object. The title of To Illuminate the Non-Representable and Transposition is for me much about the art of designing illustration in many dimensions. And I see transposition as one of many different transformation processes. Transposition is a type of transformation method, often conceptual, emphasized, but transposition in this case is a transformation method that emphasizes the emotional. Emotion was my compass for choosing this flat stone among 1,000 other flat stones, and it's based on intuition. The film you saw in the beginning of this symposium with the title From the Idea to Indication deals with transposition and illustration in many dimensions. And when I stepped from the floor and onto the stone, I entitled A Stone to Rest On for Thoughts. I perceive it as a transposition and a change of dimension, as an essential change. But as a question about intuition, how much is needed to do a transposition, to be formed into ideas and thought, and formed into spoken words and visuality? That's a question. The stone is to rest on, and for the thoughts, it's illuminating the non-representable and the immaterial. And the stone has got a form from gravity. And when the stone was laying in the mountain, it was into the dark. When you open a book, you enlight the idea. The idea becomes visible. The transposition of the stone has much of the same. And you will now see a short movie with the title Hands Over, a film which are part of an installation and an artistic research project named Yiddish für all.
Jamme, spiel mir ein Liedel.
Jamme, spiel mir ein Lied. Spiel mir ein
Liedel.
Ja.
Was das Mädel will.
Was das Mädel will?
Das Mädel will ein paar Schichles haben.
Das Mädel will ein paar Schichles haben. Schlecht haben.
What happens when there's a red dot?
It's working.
Leon, can you repeat Schichles?
Schichles.
Like this.
Schichles. So, Jamme, spiel mir ein Liedle. Was das Mädele will. Das Mädele will ein paar Schichles haben. Muss man gehen dem Schuster sagen? Nein, Mamschi, nein. Du kannst mich nicht verstehen. Du weißt nicht, was ich meine.
Great. And you pronounce some of the word Mamishi. You pronounce perfect.
Mamishi, yeah, but I like her.
Yeah, it's
She's a
so hard in this year.
Dancing, tango dancing woman, so that's good. This project Yiddish für all started with my grandmother and my friend Bambo Davis, mystical and evocative. We visit my grandmother living just above the upper reaches of our shoreline. And among her treasure was a harmonica on which she played us her own characteristic tune. Once the possessions had captured her, she augments her playing with songs in an unknown tongue. Years later, I unraveled enough family history to deduce that this was perhaps the last breathfuls of Yiddish to be spoken along our stretch of coast. And my father absorbed none of this tongue, and my curiosity was elsewhere. It was only as I got older that I embraced her absent weakness. So my artistic research project, Yiddish für all, Yiddish for everyone, is the transposition of Yiddish language and culture. And the film with the title Hands Over, you just saw, show Mira as a master, educator, which socialize the Yiddish language with me. It's lyric for the tune my grandmother played for me as a child. And today, I open an exhibition in the faculty, in the gallery for artistic research project, and this manifest and illuminate analog what we have now presented. Thank you for your attention and for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Charles Mikkelsen. For guests who are in Bergen at the moment, we invite you to visit Charles's exhibition at M61, which is open this week. Our next speaker is Assistant Professor Anastasia Raina from Rhode Island School of Design. She explores the role of machine learning and artificial intelligence in bioart and biodesign by exploring evolutionary development processes in nature and neural networks, generating shape from a single cell into a whole organism. From noise to the pixel, the presentation looks at generative adversarial network algorithms as a way for artists and designers to engage with the intelligence that has been programmed into them, and a method for transposition, visual research, and form making. The title of her presentation, Machines Have Eyes.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Raina, and I'm a Ukrainian-born designer, researcher, and an assistant professor at Rhode Island School of Design. In my research-based practice, I'm interested in exploring the aesthetics of technologically mediated form through machine vision, neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and incorporation of biomaterials into the artistic vernacular. I draw upon scientific inquiry and collaborations with scientists as means of generating new knowledge and methodologies in design. Thank you so much, Hilde, for inviting me to be part of the Illuminating the Non-Representable Symposium. It is wonderful to be able to share my work here. Our perception has been limited to what is visible to the human eye and human world. Science and technical fields see the universe more expansively and fundamentally, that we as artists and designers are only beginning to explore. As the current pandemic has shown us our human tendency to underestimate the invisible world around us, and our unwillingness to change our lifestyle accordingly, has rendered millions unprepared, immobile, and isolated while coronavirus itself spreads around the world at an unprecedented speed, jumping across species boundaries. Due to the rapid spread and devastating death toll, it has ripped open the fabric of reality, revealing the systematic failures, human exceptionalism, and uncomfortable truth of socioeconomic disparity. During the spring 2020, I led a research group titled Post-Human Mobility, consisting of students from Rhode Island School of Design. Ime Hu, a student from jewelry making and industrial design, Danley Huang, a grad student from industrial design, Georgie Nolan, a grad student from graphic design, and Meredith Bennett, a BFA student from film and animation. Our research group was part of the new collaboration between RISD and Hyundai, the leading automotive company based in Seoul, South Korea. We were asked to draw inspiration from nature in order to imagine the future of mobility. Among its many consequences, COVID-19 pandemic has exposed serious challenges related to mobility, to our innate desire to move freely through space, and my research group focused on the question of how will people travel through cities and across national borders post-pandemic, and how do we guarantee equitable access to vital mobility innovations while reducing fossil fuel consumption. Why posthuman, you may ask? The term posthuman has become a key concept in the contemporary academic debate. Posthumanism does not recognize humans as being exceptional, nor does it see them in their separateness from the rest of beings, but in connection to them. This philosophical framework of interconnectedness between humans and non-human animals, machines, and the environment informed our research and search for methods of not only being inspired by nature, but design ways in which we can work with nature. Microbial Cosmologies is an immersive project where we imagine the future of mobility that is entirely built around the most successful type of organism on the planet, the microbe. This project addresses the relationship between humans and microbes and our need to adapt and respond with agility to the new world around us and heal the deleterious effects of pandemics and injustice. Employing speculative design, industrial design, mechanical engineering, augmented reality, virtual reality, and machine learning, we set out to create a world in which humans redefine our relationship with nature to make space for inclusive human, non-human assemblages and develop methods for designing for, with, and around the microbial world within and around us. We started at the Nature Lab at Rhode Island School of Design, a unique space that gives members of the RISD community access to specimens and at multiple scales and provides an engaging platform for examining myriad of connections between artistic and scientific study. My research group focused on microbiome, the genetic material of the microbes. Whether it lives on the skin of a human, in the gut of a fly, or in the very architecture of the spaces we inhabit, the microbiome is the invisible that connects us across species, inside and out. It is also incredibly diverse and adaptable. Studies have shown that immigrants lose their native gastrointestinal microbes within 6 to 9 months after arriving into a new country. Can we even rethink citizenship and immigration borders based on our gut microflora? Throughout this project, we have been using nonlinear design process, which works together with the research, creative writing, sketching, and rapid prototyping. Unlike a typical design process, we have been researching and making simultaneously. This process has allowed us the opportunity to challenge and test concepts early on and often. No idea is too precious to be challenged, nor too trivial to be overlooked. Our project has transformed and adapted with the evolution of the pandemic to consider the emerging research published every day. We began creating speculative scenarios, worlds, and diegetic objects that facilitated the relationship between humanity and the microorganisms inhabiting the same space by exploring plausible, possible, probable responses to issues at hand. These worlds and objects have become less speculative and more real the further the project has developed. By adapting design processes from our respective disciplines, we have developed our unique way of working as a team where we were able to benefit from each other's strengths. We have borrowed elements from industrial design, graphic design, and animation disciplines to build a new design method which works in flux with our individual expertise. Bacteria are the most abundant organisms in our biosphere, capable of doubling their population in under 10 minutes. By placing the microbe at the center of our project, we challenge our human exceptionalism, constructs of national borders and citizenship. We are creating a microbiopolitical state where life is sustained by this vast resource. Energy is generated by the microorganisms harvested from the environment, and the waste from the bodies of citizens is used as part of the local circular economy. Microbial cosmologies is an immersive exploration into this future of mobility in a microbe-centric world. The microbiome here defines our identity and citizenship. The world runs on global gut technology, and energy is produced from microbial biofuels. Economies revolve around cultivating a unique human microbiome currency, and synthetic biology is used to program and govern this microbiopolitical state. Post-pandemic society has embraced artificial evolution and dramatic shifts in urban planning, contactless habitation, biometric monitoring, and co-immunities. For this project, we used augmented reality as an entry point into our research, and with this technology, it is easy to begin to imagine these objects in your immediate environment. Augmented reality creates a sense of hands-on engagement with virtual objects and its behavior at an entirely different scale. One of my personal contributions to this collaboration is a set of artificial microorganisms that are yet to be discovered. They were generated by StyleGAN, a deep learning algorithm that was trained on thousands of images of microorganisms that make up a human microbiome. After the training process, I extrapolated images in latent space, which is a topology of all AI-generated images and spans over 512 dimensions, which is a vast space for image variation and produces infinite number of mutations. While in latent space, I interpolated between images, and you see here the programmable smooth movement that results in this beautifully uncanny motion that resembles the progression of morphology of the specific shape through generations. And here you're seeing AI-generated microbes being utilized as part of the microbial passport animation created by George Nolan. The need for physical passports, visas, records of immigration, and other identification documents are erased in our speculative world. All records of travel are identifiable in passengers' microbiome data, and the microbial passport is reissued every 6 months to reflect the constant shifts in the personal microbiome. Adaptation and quick reaction has been integral to our ability to work as a team during COVID-19 pandemic. The project was initially intended to culminate as a final exhibition in Seoul, which would no longer be going ahead given the extreme circumstances of the pandemic. We felt our exhibition strategy should reflect the same feeling of urgency and adapt to the current circumstances we were facing. A website and virtual experience of our diegetic prototypes invites public to have instant access to the body of research at a time when it feels relevant. In order to bring these objects into virtual exhibition space, Meredith, Ime, and Dunley worked on merging the worlds of industrial design and CAD modeling into the world of real-time rendering and interactive media. To put more simply, we blurred the lines between industrial design and animation, inventing our own pipeline as we worked on this project. The pandemic exposed us to the precariousness and entanglement of invisible forces around us, powerful enough to bring countries to a full stop. In our posthuman mobility research group, we addressed the power dynamic between humans, microbes, and viruses, and rethought what mobility means in the age of pandemic, when distribution of bodies, goods, and information is now carefully choreographed by the invisible microorganisms that move through space with us. And through this portal, we glimpse possibilities of other worlds. We speculate collectively about our future. hopefully a more pluralistic future of coexistence between humans and significant others, starting with the virus. Thank you.
Our final speaker today is Usta. She's a sound artist working with site-specific sound art. She will speak about the sound installation Time Tone Passages, based in archive material from Deutsche Welle.
Hello. My name is Usta. I would like to welcome you at my studio, or it's not my studio, it's an artist residency studio that I have got access to for a period at Universitet in Bergen. As you see here, there's a lot of portable radios, which I use in my work as sonic elements and as visual elements, and also context-wise. There is a lot of different histories and content to take out of the radio. I'm interested in the radio as history. There has been so much development in the radio for instance, from this huge radio furniture, really, from early times till the small handheld radio that we keep in our pockets. And actually now we have also transferred the radio to different ways of use, so we don't really listen to the radio in the same way as we did before. So I'm interested in this, and I'm also interested in how we change the history or change our ways of using these radios when time flows. I'm a sound artist, and I work in the intersection of audio and visual art, basically with sound installations, at times some performances, but most of all I'm very interested in working in specific spaces, to implement sound and visuals and how to transfer a space into an experience, which is different from the space experience from before. So I will present one work today that's called Transposition, or in English, Time Tone Passages, which is a site-specific work in Germany, in Bonn, in a passage which was 70 meters long. The sound or the whole installation is based on the archive material of Deutsche Welle. And Deutsche Welle is radio broadcast, international radio broadcast station that has been broadcasting to internationally since 1953, and it's still going on. So I've been following this, the material in the archive from its start till today, and trying to make a kind of a adaptation of all this work into my own installation, or my installation in Bonn.
Am Jahresende über das Vergangene nachzudenken und einen Blick in die Zukunft zu wagen, das ist meinem lieben Zuhörer ein alter Brauch. Jeder hat seine Erinnerungen, teils freundliche, teils traurige, aus dem engsten Umkreis seiner Erfahrungen, und diese Erinnerungen sind für die Note über dem abgelaufenen Jahr zu erklären.
The archive is amazing. It's really, it's 60 years of accumulating material. All the history from the radio which contains a lot of news, music, jingles, etc. And I've been focusing most on one thing that I found really interesting is the languages, as Germany or Deutsche Welle never broadcast their programs in Germany itself, but broadcast to the world. And in the beginning, it was for the German diaspora who was living abroad and could receive the German language and news where they were living. Eventually, they started to broadcast in English, in Spanish, etc. And this increased over time. So in 1962, I think Arab came in, and then it eventually went on, and the diversity of languages was increasing till into the 90s, where it was about 40 languages, different languages, and 40 different countries who could receive or listen to these broadcasts. And that was a high peak of the language diversity broadcast on linear radio in Deutsche Welle. And that was also, the decrease started with the advent of the internet, who came in, and the whole information flow changed, as we know, from the entering of the digital era. And this also followed with the language increase and decrease. So then it started to decrease, and in the 2000 it was not so many. And in 2017, when I was opening the exhibition or the installation, it was about 7 languages that was broadcasting linearly or analogously from Deutsche Welle. The diversity was kept on in other forms, like migrated to internet stations, and also different ways to present media and news, etc. today. I had a really good collaboration with a sound archivist in Deutsche Welle called Christian Speaker, and he gave me 3 minutes of each language.
Am Jahresende über das Vergangene nachzudenken und einen Blick in die Zukunft zu wagen, das ist, meine lieben Zuhörer, ein alter Brauch.
Queridos amigos en la América Latina, permítame que les dirija unas palabras en relación a una modificación que vamos a introducir en nuestros programas.
هنا إذاعة صوت ألمانيا في كولونيا. نقدم إليكم سيداتي سادتي حديثا حول مدينة المعارض الألمانية هانوفر.
So I was only using spoken words. I was not so interested in the melodies or the jingles, etc. But the languages that I thought had this incredibly rich, it was a pool of, also as some kind of time capsules, which I used for my composition. And I made a score where I used the time frame or the time development. So in my composition too, I start with German, and then eventually coming in from 62 the Arab, as I said, and it's developing. And in the 90s, even though Norway was for a short time in there, and this is part of the composition. This development is like a general structure for the composition. We can play some excerpts, and it's possible to listen to this. Also, there's, as you heard a little bit before, there was a German station clear, and here when we play it again, we can play it as the composition is starting, the start of the composition.
Am Jahresende über das Vergangene nachzudenken und einen Blick in die Zukunft zu wagen, das ist, meine lieben Zuhörer, ein alter Brauch. Jeder hat seine Erinnerungen, teils freundliche, teils traurige, aus dem engsten Umkreis seiner Erfahrungen. Und diese Erinnerungen sind für die Note, die wir dem abgelaufenen Jahr zu erteilen pflegen, wohl die wichtigsten. Mancher mag von seinen privaten Sorgen so stark in Anspruch genommen sein, dass er weder Gelegenheit noch Anlass findet, seine Aufmerksamkeit auf die allgemeinen Angelegenheiten seines Landes oder gar die politischen Vorgänge in der Welt zu richten.
And when I say the start, it's not really true, because in an installation it's never a start and a stop, it goes endlessly. And in the space where the installation is happening, every hour the German starts. And the composition loop in the walls, I will talk a little bit about that afterwards, was 1 hour. So when we come to the space and to the wall, on the left-hand side there is these copper-colored speakers that they are 31, and each one of these has one language. So the first one is German, the 6th is Arab, the 16th is Swahili, etc., etc. The sound is put in 3 different layers. So the first layer is from these copper-colored language speakers, as I called it, and the sound is not only the sound itself, it's just as much edited, filtered voices, and at certain points in the composition it's only the resonance of the voice. So this is the transpositions that I do while working with the material. On the right-hand side, in that passage, there is some naked speakers or open speakers that playing back the technical signals from the radio. Like it could be, for instance, a time pip that's put on a really long delay, so you hear ding like this. And it's also the crackles that signifies the error of radio. But actually, I find it's in such a beautiful signals, and I think it means a lot to us how we've been listening to these signals and the errors while we've been growing up. And the third layer in this composition is from the roof, where I have 4 full-tone speakers that are moving. The sound is moving, but it's a more ambient sound or drone-like sound that is in a way keeping the whole composition together. And it's also coloring the space so that when the people passing by, it gets changed from, for instance, in the morning, it's quite high-pitched sounds. And in the daytime, it's going further and further back down in pitch, and in the end, it's a more bassy, drone-like bassy sound that's played back in the 2.5 hours in the evening. So these changes is also meaning that the audience who get into the installation, they will know a little bit of what time of the day it is. And they can also, if they just don't get in there exactly at the same time every day, but just maybe 1 minute difference, they will hear different sounds from the speakers on the wall as well. The work site sound passation was carried out in 3 different editions. But just using the same material. So first of all, it was the sound installation that I have presented here, which was also running for 2 years, 10 hours a day. So in a way, it was really implemented in the space and changing the character of the space through these 2 years. And I also heard when the installation was over that it was some kind of new sounds coming up there, but that were not from me. They were just from cars and people passing by. But it meant also that the change of the installation had a big impact for the people moving through there every day. The second version or edition of this work was by the end of the installation period. It was 1 hour radio concert in the space where people got chairs, so we put out a lot of chairs in the space. It would be perfect for Corona time because it was a lot of space. And it also was played as a concert, so people could relax, sit and hear the entire work in opposed to working as a passage. It was certainly a concert space. And the third edition was the Deutschland Funk invited me to make a 50 minutes rework or remix of the installation from 40 channels into stereo. So I worked with that, which was quite a big challenge for how do you do a big spatial work into 2 channels. But I loved the challenge also because it came back to this one, you know? Suddenly the sound was changing from, it started broadcasting in Deutsche Welle, 4 people receiving it on the radio, then out to the 40 channels in the big space in Bonn, and then back again to the radio being listened to on just a kitchen radio somewhere. So that was like 3 different experiences of the same material, and maybe you could call it transpositions. Thank you.
That concludes the presentations of the second day of this symposium, Transposition as Artistic Practice. For those of you who were not here yesterday, I'm Hilde Kramer, Professor of Illustration at the Faculty of Fine Art, Music and Design in the University of Bergen. I'm also the coordinator of the International Artistic Research Project Illuminating the Non-Representable, exploring artistic, ethical and authorial challenges through research and design. It has been a very rewarding opportunity to hear all these perspectives on transposition during these 2 days. And we will now take a short intermission and meet again on Zoom, and you may join us. There is a link on the project website, illuminating.no. You find the same link on the KMD website. So, when we meet again, I will be joined by sound artist Maja Usta and composer Daniel Peter Biro. We start at 5 o'clock Central European Time. So I hope you will join us and see you there.